Hello, YouTube. Let me take you today to places most Westerners know very little about. Mongolia and some neighboring lands are the destinations today, and the subject I'll speak about is the relic hominid, or Yeti, Almas, or almasta, the abominable snowman. The creature that resembles humans has many names. But beyond that, I want to tell you this. Mongolia is a land of many surprises. I'm not young anymore to explore them, but some daring people have been doing so. And given a chance, I would love to get back to Eurasia and see Mongolia, because there are places to explore. But to me, Mongolia, its Gobi Desert, is one of the most fascinating places on this planet. After many years of research, I am convinced there are underground cities under the desert. There may be abodes of ancient terrestrial civilization, or maybe something else. And Tibet has a number of secrets that few in the West realize, and not only in the West, of course. As there are secrets in the Siberian taiga, as I've told you in my other videos. Ivan Yefremov said this about Mongolia. Here in Gobi, like nowhere else, you feel how saturated the earth is with memory of its past. And he knew what he was talking about. My sources are not only Ivan Yefremov, Nikolai Rerich, Andrew Thomas, but also my own diligent research of open source materials and so forth. I have posted my views in my videos, but today I want to talk about another area of my research. Relic hominids, better known as wild men or hairy men, and by various other names, are thought to inhabit various areas of the Caucasus and Asia, particularly the mountains of Central Asia. Numerous tales originating in different countries, ethnic groups, as well as different cultures and religions speak of encounters with these unusual creatures. Despite the great diversity of witnesses, their descriptions are similar. In contrast with comparable stories circulating in the rest of the world, the uniformity of the eyewitness reports, as well as their analysis, show that in Central Asia, these reports go well beyond the realm of folklore, myth, or legends. About half of the territory of Mongolia is occupied by low mountains, covered with steppe, like savanna vegetation. In the north of the country, there are several large lakes surrounded by a wide belt of reed beds. In the west, the Altai mountain spurs are the Mongolian Altai. The southern part of the country is a rocky desert, the Mongolian Gobi, etc. The population is very minimal there. Of the animals, there are wild camels, horses, for example, the famous Przewalski horse, wild donkeys, wolves, foxes, jackals, wild boars in the reed thickets around the lakes. Well, let me tell you about the sightings of, we can call them animals or humanoids in that land. For example, in 1964, two girls, students of the second grade Dulanjab in Dersuran, and the 6-year-old Kolaka, were collecting firewood. Suddenly, they saw a big hairy man covered with shaggy brown hair. Throwing down the brushwood, they rushed to run. The hairy man did not pursue them. Well, in 1965, Doctor of Mineral and Geological Sciences from the USSR, Morozov, worked on the territory of the Middle Gobi. One day after returning from work, he went to sleep in his tent. At night, he woke up because someone was pulling the tent's tripwires hard. Then there was a crash from the falling empty crates of food. Outraged, Morozov jumped out of the tent and came face to face with a shaggy, hairy humanoid creature standing in front of the tent. The hairy man was of small stature, about 170 centimeters. His disproportionately long arms hung at his sides. Morozov remembered that some very unpleasant smell emanated from this creature. The encounter lasted several seconds. Morozov rushed away from the tent to the general camp. He was followed by a hard, rending scream of an irritated creature. Then we move on to the year 1971. A group of Soviet petroleum geologists, which included Arkady Nikiforov, worked in Mongolia, also in the Middle Gobi. One night, Nikiforov was awakened by a terrible noise. His tent was shaking. Someone tried to knock it down. The geologist jumped out to punish the joker, but instead of a human joker, a completely creepy image of an incomprehensible creature appeared before him. What struck him, Nikiforov later recalled, was not the size. The creature was about 10 centimeters taller than him, but a terrible, disgusting smell. The creature standing in front of him resembled a human, but its entire body was covered with dark brown fur. The neck was missing and the arms seemed very long, perhaps because their strange owner was very stooped. The geologist and the unknown creature looked at each other for a while, and then with a scream they rushed in different directions. Nikiforov, in fear, rushed to the tent and frantically began to search for a gun. People came running to his screams. Having told about the incident, Nikiforov offered to take guns and try to shoot this creature. To his suggestion, the Mongols, who were at the same time and at the same place, replied that it was the same animal as gazelle or camel. It doesn't do anything bad to people. It turned out that the Mongol workers often had to deal with this creature in mountainous areas. Then there is the story of the person named Abitov. He served in 1978 in Mongolia as a driver. One day, he fell behind his column, troubleshooting and catching up with them, got lost. It was late afternoon, and Abitov decided to spend the night. Stopping the car, the driver got out of the cab to get acquainted with the terrain. Low hills towered all around. Mountains were visible in the distance behind them. A small river flowed about 2 kilometers away. Thick grass grows in the valley between the river and the hills. In such dense places, even the fall of a stone or a rock can be heard very far away. Suddenly, the driver noticed 2 people. Thinking that they were Arats, it's Mongolian peasants, he ran to them. But when he ran closer, the driver saw that these creatures were shaggy. They gathered and ate grass. One was taller than the other. The heads were round, the neck was not visible, the chest was wide. When they saw Abitov, they stopped eating grass. The tall one made a sound like a horse neighing, showing his teeth at the same time. After looking at the driver, they left up the valley and he returned to the car. In 1963, Soviet engineer Ivlev finished his contract work in Mongolia, and before leaving for his homeland, he was offered a trip to the picturesque places of the country in which he worked. He was brought to the mountains of the Mongolian Altai. The Mongols treated Ivlev very warmly, not only in gratitude for his work, but also in memory of his father, who worked as a doctor in Mongolia for many years. There is even a monument to him in Ulaanbaatar. And the Mongols, accompanying Ivlev, prepared a surprise for him. They decided to show him the living Almas. They took Ivlev to a certain gorge, and there, on one of the rocky ledges, a family of hairy Almas appeared in front of them, a father, a mother, and a cub. Almas and the people looked at each other for several minutes. Adult Almas were 5 or 6 feet tall. Their bodies were covered with light brown hair. Without hair, there were only faces, hands, and feet. Their faces were bordered by sideburns and a small beard. On the head, which had a conical shape, the hair was darker and hung over very broad shoulders. They moved on 2 legs, but with bent knees and slightly leaning forward. They were not wearing any clothes. According to the Mongols, Almas lead a nocturnal lifestyle, but are especially active at dusk and dawn. Almas are vegetarians. Their favorite food is root vegetables and various herbs. Rumor has it that the Almas has some primitive tools. For many years, The Mongolian researcher Rajib has been studying the Almas subject. He walked for many kilometers in the footsteps of the Almas. On December 15, 1973, he photographed the tracks along which he walked more than 16 miles. During his expeditions, the Mongolian explorer was able to explore only 2 of the 18 Aimags of Mongolia. An Aimag, originally a Mongolian word meaning tribe, is an administrative subdivision in Mongolia. Many areas of the Mongolian Altai and other eastern and northeastern Aimags, from where the latest information about the Almas came, have not been practically studied. Nobody explored them. So here's more about Rajir's expedition to the mountains of the Mongolian Altai. As the newspaper Hidulur reported, the Mongolian researcher spent 1,340 days in the mountains of Mongolian Altai in search of Almas. Every person believes his own eyes, and I'm convinced that there is a humanoid creature, Almas, in the Mongolian Altai, he said, going on the expedition. So Rajib was in the mountains of the extreme west of Mongolia from the summer of 1973 to the spring of 1977. He managed to see Almas from afar 3 times, photograph the creature's tracks more than 30 times, collect several dozen oral testimonies of people about this creature. On the 1st of July of 1973, Rajib's group, together with hunters and guides, was at the foot of the Humiglen in the territory of Tolba Bayan Ulagay Aimag. When climbing the mountain, he reached the edge of the eternal snows melting under the summer sun, and he saw 2 large footprints on the wet ground. The track length was 33.5 centimeters with a width of 13 centimeters. Plaster casts were made from these prints. In March of 1973, in the mountains of the Kobdus Ayamag, 8 search participants were sitting in an ambush. One night, one of them lit a match, and immediately there was a loud sound like a shrill whistle, and rocks fell down. Looking in that direction through binoculars, people saw a stooped humanoid creature that picked up something from the ground, sent it to his mouth, and sat down on a stone. This made it possible to photograph and sketch it. In the Mongolian Altai, local residents very often tell stories about the existence of humanoid, erect, hairy animals, which in Mongolian are called Hun-Gures, man-beast, or Almas. In remote and completely deserted areas, Russian explorers repeatedly stumbled upon rocks literally dotted with black openings of entrances at the heights inaccessible to humans. In these God-forsaken places, it was easy to believe in the possible existence of relic creatures or some other species unknown to science, successfully hiding from humans in the most inaccessible mountain caves, and preserve to this day features of the ape-men of the distant past. The Tsagan Bogdul mountain massif frames the Za-Altai Gobi, Trans-Altai Gobi, from the south, and is the easternmost spur in the chain of the Tian Shan Mountains, and I told you about those mountains in my other videos. From the main peak of the Tsagan Bog Massif to the border with China is about 15 kilometers, and the territory of the neighboring state is clearly visible from the top. Please see my video about the Chinese wild man, or Yeti, and so forth, and I'll list in the description of this video how to see it. The mountain range is interesting because only here dwells the Gobi bear, keep it in mind, the Mazalai, a relict animal, a living witness of a different climate and a different landscape, which to some may have become the prototype of the mysterious hairy people, Almas, abominable snowmen of Central Asia. Currently, the special status of this animal has not been definitely clarified. It is believed that this is a unique population of brown bear living in a real desert environment. It is hardly possible to unambiguously associate only this bear with the stories about hairy people or creatures that are common in Mongolia. Evidence of encounters and observations of mysterious almas is too widespread geographically. Evidence of encounters with almas in Mongolia could be found in print as early as the late 1970s, for example. According to eyewitnesses, writes in his book Monuments of History and Culture of Mongolia, first deputy chairman of the Council of Ministers of the Mongolian People's Republic, MPR, chairman of the State Committee of the MPR for Science and Technology, Doctor of Historical Sciences, Maidar. Here's what Maidar writes. The search for the so-called ape man, or living Neanderthal, Sinanthrope, or Almas, Hung Resu, abominable snowman, or Yeti, in Mongolia has its own history. Eyewitnesses testified that they used to roam in packs, but now they are very rare in the Altai Mountains, in the Kobdo and Bayan Ulga IMAX. The Academy of Sciences of the NPR organized a survey of the local population of this IMAX about Almas. Dozens of people testified about them in the Bayan Ulgi IMAG, and 16 of them confirmed that they themselves had seen Almas. Almas is a half animal, half human with reddish-black hair. The face is hairless, the belly is covered with sparse vegetation. The head is pointed on the back of the head, and at the back of the head, the forehead is flattened. The brow arches protrude strongly. The cheekbones are prominent. About the height of an average person, Almas walks with bent knees, stooped club foot. He has broad shoulders, long arms. The big toe sticks out. Women have long breasts. Almas are timid, suspicious, but not aggressive. They lead a nocturnal lifestyle. No one heard their speech. To verify these reports, an expedition of the Committee of Sciences of the NPR was sent to the Tsagan Bogdo Mountains in the late 1930s of the 20th century. The members of the expedition spent a lot of time in the mountains, but the expedition failed to confirm the existence of a human animal, the hairy Almas. Geographer Murzaev and his companion botanist Yunatov became the first scientists to see a live Almas, and they say Gobi bear in August of 1943. We managed to notice, wrote Murzaev in his diaries, that the Gobi bear is not very large. It was smaller than a brown forest bear. The Gobi hermit was dark brown in color with tufts of old faded hair sticking out on the animal's skin over the young dark fur. The bear ran quickly and deftly, climbing the slope of the valley with agility. The Mongols said that the Gobi bear is very smart, cautious, and difficult to see. The legend added that the Gobi bear perfectly understands human speech, lives in inaccessible rocks where it has comfortable dwellings. It does not show itself to a person and walks on its hind legs. Superstitious nomads explain these qualities of the Gobi bear as follows. The Gobi bears are some kind of hairy people. They can talk and live in caves where they are rarely seen by anyone. Thus, according to scientists, was born the legend of the hairy Gobi people, the Almas. Now let us look at Tuva. The Republic of Tuva is the youngest republic of the Russian Federation. It is situated in the geographical center of Asia, in the eastern Siberia. The capital of Tuva is Kyzyl. And for those who want to know, the population of Tuva is only about 318,000 people, but the area is 168,000 plus square kilometers. The Tuvans, the native inhabitants of the republic, make up about 80% of the total population. The Tuvan minorities also live in neighboring Mongolia and in China. The Tuvans, one of the most ancient peoples of Central Asia, have preserved their unique culture, the culture of nomads, the lifestyle which runs the generations. The native language is Tuvan, which is a Turkic language, and Tuva has Relic hominids. Here is the testimony of yeah, from the Tuva Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic. So this was in the days before the disintegration of the Soviet Union. My grandfather was staying with us. I told him that there are wild people in some of parts of our country. To my surprise, in response, I heard that in Tuva there are furry creatures of huge stature, very similar to humans. Their name is Kizhiburus, that is humanoid. Grandpa told me the two stories that he heard from his grandfather when he was young. Yes, by the way, he also said that it was a long time ago when our climate was warmer. One hunter, after an unsuccessful hunt, smoked a pipe zinda by the fire. It was late at night and he didn't portend anything unusual. When suddenly someone threw a rock at him, but only hit the pipe, which flew off to the side, and the hunter quickly turned around and saw someone shaggy, of huge stature, who hurried into the bushes. At first, the grandfather thought it was a bear, but a bear who dared to throw a stone would not run away so quickly, but would roar for a long time. A seasoned hunter, he immediately determined that it was a Kizhiburus. He heard that wild people live in the taiga and that they sometimes attack ordinary people, killing them with a rock on the head. And there were those who killed them, but the meat of wild people was not like that of animals, but like that of humans. Superstitious people thought that these were messengers of Asa and Shulbus, that is, the devils. The next day, the hunter still shot a raw deer. After removing the entrails, he hung the carcass on a tree, marking the place, and went hunting further away. In the evening, he came back and saw this, that some creature was eating meat. The creature was shaggy, huge in stature. It was sitting on the ground, tearing out pieces of meat directly from the carcass of the raw deer. The hunter wanted to run away, but suppressing his fear, he shot at the Kizhiburus. That's all. Then they say the creature left this place forever. And now another case. Two women near a mountain stream were combing their hair when suddenly one of them accidentally looked up and saw two Kizhiburus sitting nearby and also combing their hair. Then one of the women who saw the Kizhiburus screamed. The Kizhiburus stood for a while and ran away. At this time, the husband of one of the women left with nomads to graze sheep. She asked a friend to come to her for the night. It was getting dark quickly. The woman's friend did not come. Either she did not want to or she forgot, but the woman had to spend the night alone. Late at night, she heard some rustling behind the wall. She quickly put a log on her bed, covered it with blanket, and hid herself behind the door at the entrance. After a while, the Kizhiburus very quietly entered the chandir, the house. Carefully stepping, approached the bed and hit the headboard several times. When the creature began to leave quietly, the concealed woman hit it on the head with an axe. After a while, she was also able to kill the second Kizhiburus. Fearing the revenge of the Kizhiburus, local people burned the chandir since it was made of branches and dried quite well over the summer. And the storyteller says that, they think that Kizhiburus still exist in Tuva. This was taken in the story in Kara Hasak in 1987. And now here's a testimony of a person, Valentin Ivanovich from Novosibirsk. That's a city in Siberia. In the summer of 1969, our party worked in the central part of the Yenisei Ridge. The nearest village mine was several hundred kilometers away. Untouched taiga is all around. The absolute marks of the mountains are about 700 to 800 meters. The relative distance exceeded up to 200 to 300 meters. For some reason, I had to move from one group to another, one team to another, at a distance of 25 kilometers. I walked along the watershed. It was slightly wooded. I walked mainly on rubble overgrown with moss. I had a compass, a map, and a revolver. It was drizzling and a light breeze was blowing. I walked almost inaudibly. About halfway through, around noon, I suddenly heard a whistle and was very surprised, thinking, how can there be a person here? I stopped and looked at the place where the whistle came from. Suddenly, a dark round head appeared above the thickets of cedar wood, about 1.5 meters high, looked around in fright and disappeared into the bushes again. The distance to it was 20 to 25 meters. The time during which it was visible was 2 to 3 seconds. I did not have time to see it properly, only saw the general outlines. My glasses were covered with drizzle. I stood behind a thick birch tree, pulled out a revolver, and began to wipe my glasses. A few minutes later, the whistle sounded again, accompanied by some kind of hissing or buzzing, and the bushes moved with a crash. I stood on the platform, and I could clearly see from above how the tops of the bushes were shaking. Then again, a dark head appeared above the bushes for 2 or 3 seconds, looked around, and disappeared into the bushes again. The whistling was heard again, then a strong crackling of breaking thick branches. The bushes moved more strongly. I realized that the creature in the bushes was showing me its strength, wanted to scare me, but I didn't know where I was. But the creature did not know where he was. I prepared my weapon for battle, and in order not to annoy the one sitting in the bushes anymore, I knocked on the birch with the revolver. The creature in panic rushed in the opposite direction from me, and for a few more seconds, I saw his fat ass, which he threw above his head as he ran on all fours down the slope. It looked like a bear. The only unusual things were whistling, the absence of growling, and a round head and a neck thinner than that of a bear. It was about the size of an average bear. The coat color was ash gray. The nearest distance at which I saw it is about 20 meters. I have seen bears many times during my travels, but this creature was not like them. I told experienced hunters about it, but they laughed at me and said that the bear does not whistle. After a while, I read an article about the abominable snowman, which said that it whistles. And it dawned on me, did I see a snowman? Abominable snowman. I would like to believe that it was a relic hominid, but two circumstances confuse me. One, why did it run down the mountain on all fours like an ordinary animal? Two, why experienced hunters who tracked down and killed several dozen bears have never seen either hominids or even their tracks? Again, this was in Novosibirsk in the year 1987. Then there was an interview taken by the APN correspondent Zheredyov with an expert on the cryptids, Georgy Alexeyevich. I have only some experts from this fascinating interview. And here it goes. Something about the distribution, area, nutrition, and habitat conditions of relic hominids of Siberia. According to legends and the results of surveys of the indigenous population, currently it is very difficult to talk about the distribution area of a huge fur-covered humanoid creature, the very existence of which causes serious controversy in scientific circles. The matter is further complicated in many ways by the fact that the vast territory of Siberia and the Far East are involved in the sphere of intensive human economic activity. New cities are being built, railways are being stretched, huge areas of the taiga are being cut down, the last sections of the wild taiga are being plowed. The economic development of new territories entails a lot of immigrants from western regions of the country who are little interested in the lifestyle and spiritual heritage of the indigenous peoples of Siberia. Not only that, there is often a dismissive attitude of visitors, in fact guests, to the folklore and customs of the hosts. This leads to such a sad consequence. The indigenous population is wary of visitors. They hunt Selkup, Nenets, Yukagir, Russians, old-timers, and others reluctantly dedicate new newcomers or reveal to newcomers the secrets of their past. It is often completely impossible to get these people to talk to the visitors. Everything concerning beliefs and shamanism, everything connected with the possessor of the taiga, I guess that's the right word, maybe the lord of the taiga, is a real taboo for the curious, for those who first ask and then pull away literally everything. Idols from ancient temples, ritual shawls that wrap sacred trees and shamanic places, they wrap graves, chapels, even wrap hunting huts. It is sad that such cases are often handled by some employees of regional museums of local lore. Naturally, it is very difficult to conduct research in such an environment. But on the other hand, where the informants recognized us as their own, that is, native Siberians, things went easily, without much difficulty. The only thing we were asked to do was not to name names, but that wasn't even everywhere. As for the nutrition, the information I received from the narrators about the nutrition of the paleoanthropic beings sometimes caused me a feeling of bewilderment and distrust of those informants, of people who provide information. For example, for a long time I could not understand what a humanoid creature could find in licking a bare stone, and even doing it in winter. Some indigenous inhabitants of the Middle Urals claim that a hairy man not only licks stones but also eats them. At the same time, they refer to their fathers and grandfathers and often to their own observations. Since in winter on the bare slopes of mountains, among the stone scree, they sometimes came across traces of huge bare feet and stones torn apart by huge paws. Some people observed the owners of these tracks themselves, wandering among the landslides. I had to deal with this separately. It turned out that the wild people really like to eat lichen growing on the surface of the stones. The locals showed exactly what kind of lichen the bolshak eats. That's what the Russian old-timers, the Siberians, call the hominid, by that name, bolshak. And even they tried it themselves. I tried it too and agreed with them that it was probably possible to eat it. Of all types of lichens growing on rocks, the bolshak prefers Nakapina or Itrarium, Latin names. In one of the districts, I was told that the Maigiki, I've never met such a name for a wild man, but that's what it is, that they eat a local plant and lichen with pleasure. According to the witness, Maigiki first soaks the berry in running water and only then eats it and consumes it in large quantities, especially in springtime. According to some reports, at the beginning of spring, the Maigiki gladly eat young shoots of pine trees, birch branches, sucks the shoots of the willow, tearing off the bark from them. But it does not like aspen. It only eats its juice. Let's move on to another territory in Eurasia. Nepal and Tibet are located on the spurs of the Himalayas, one of the highest mountain systems, two ridges stretching along the northern borders of India. At this point, two mainland platforms, Indian and Asian, touch. At the point of their contact, folds formed, mountain ridges, on which, on the main part of the highest mountain peaks, is located. 8 of them rise above 8,000 meters above the sea level. The southern slopes of the Himalayas below the border of snow and alpine meadows are covered with tropical and subtropical vegetation. The northern ones are mainly high-altitude steppes, turning north into the deserts. The animal world corresponds to the plant world. The eastern part of the Himalayas is gradually decreasing, and according to its natural conditions, it is an area of moist tropical forests with corresponding flora and fauna. The existence of wild hairy people in the Himalayas is well known to local residents, and not from myths and legends that old people tell their grandchildren, but from the stories of eyewitnesses who encountered these creatures during their hikes in mountain forests and gorges. Here are some recent reports from the Himalayas. It's mostly, I refer to Russian sources. In the Russian newspaper Argumenty и Fakty on March 13, 1994 issue, the following article was published. In 1924, a Soviet expedition to the Himalayas, led by Professor Vedensky, discovered the lair of some animal. During several days of observation of this lair, it was found that a Yeti family lived in it, a large male and a pregnant female. We decided to catch them in order to bring them to Moscow for further study. But the Yetis put up such a fierce resistance that they had to be shot. The male was killed immediately and the female went into labor. The members of the expedition had to turn into midwives. The wounded mother died, but the newborn survived. And he was safely brought to Moscow. One of the members of the expedition, let's call him by the initials V, expressed a desire to take the baby for upbringing. The experiment continued until the end of VV's life and was crowned with success. The boy grew up as a normal child, only slightly lagging behind his peers in development. He was stooped, low-browed, his body was excessively hairy at a young age, but this does not distinguish him from the general mass of children. VV registered him under his surname. The boy graduated from 7th grade and worked as a loader, having heavy loads and so forth. And as he had great physical strength, no one knew about his origin, since all the members of the Himalayan expedition died in Stalin's dungeons during the Soviet purges when millions of people were killed by the regime. Now we're speaking about 1994. The adopted son of VV is no longer there. He died quite early, but his son remained. And the latter, by the way, has become quite a famous person. He was a member of the Soviet parliament and then was elected to the Russian State Duma, or parliament. Several people from the Russian Academy of Sciences know that he is the son of the abominable snowman. The fact is that VV, as a true scientist, kept a detailed diary of observations of his adopted son throughout the whole time. Before his death, he bequeathed to his wife to transfer his records to the Academy of Sciences, but the secrecy stamp has not yet been removed from these documents, since a well-known politician, a deputy of the State Duma, does not really want to declassify his family tree. For the same reason, we cannot name his surname. That was from that article on Argumenty and Fakty. Now let's look at another territory. In 1942, a group of prisoners of war escaped from a Soviet labor camp located somewhere in eastern Siberia and made it across the continent to Tibet, where high in the mountains near the Klumbu Pass, the fugitives noticed two incomprehensible creatures similar to humans moving along a snowy slope. Approaching them, they saw two huge hairy people about 8 feet, 2.5 meters tall. They were powerfully built, broad-shouldered, with long arms and almost square heads with hair that fell to their shoulders. Later, local residents said that they met Singa Singh, which means bear man. In other areas of Tibet, this creature is called Dzu-Ti. And finally, the Himalayas. In 1978, a group of Polish climbers went to the Himalayas. Their goal was to climb Lhotse, 8,511 meters in height. On the way back after a successful ascent, the climbers were in for a surprise. From the media and from their Sherpa porters, they knew quite a lot about the wild, hairy, humanoid Yeti creatures found in the Himalayas. And when one morning they got out of the tents and walked along the snow-covered path to the nearest neighboring camp, where the French expedition was staying, while walking along the trail half a kilometer from the camp and approaching the icefall, The climbers saw fresh traces of bare human feet, clearly imprinted on the recently fallen snow. The tracks were traced for hundreds of meters. They didn't look like the tracks of any known animal. These were not the tracks of a bear. And where could it have come from at such an altitude in the autumn time, when all the animals descend from the highlands into the forests to feed for the winter? It could not have been a man, since people do not walk barefoot on glaciers, and their sizes were not human. The footprints were of two sizes. The large tracks were 35 centimeters long and 22 centimeters wide. The depth of the tracks was twice as deep excuse me, as the depth of the climbers' tracks on the same snow. This testified to the great weight of the creature that left traces. Large and small tracks strayed side by side. In some difficult areas, small tracks disappeared. It seemed that in these places a large creature took a small one in his arms and carried him. The tracks started from the camp of the French expedition, where various things were left, including bales of food. From the French camp, the tracks went towards the icefall, where they were lost among the ice blocks. These tracks were captured on film by the expedition's cameraman Jerzy Sturdel and shown on Moscow television in the year of 1978. The most valuable thing about these photographs was that they clearly showed that at least two hairy creatures unknown to science live in the Himalayas: a giant anthropoid ape, Yeti, and a more humanoid hominid. It was not known which of them the Sherpas call Yeti. These hominids clearly do not have appeared from nowhere. The term relic or relic used to describe them demonstrates antiquity of this type of hominid, which seems to have survived as an anomaly in parallel to us, to Homo sapiens. And it is thought in science that we are the only living hominid creatures. As I have shown in my videos, there are creatures on this planet we still know very little about. And we should find out more. And I'm hoping one day to get to Mongolia. I'm training, and I have a dog who is actually a Korean wolf who is helping me in my exercises. We live on a fascinating planet. There are areas on this planet that have not been really explored. I know about the deserts of Southwest Africa, of Eurasia, but there are so many more places. In Brazil, of what I know, I've seen just a small bit, but there is so much more. In other areas. And there is the Antarctica and so much more, and I'll do my best to bring you videos of my experiences and my research and testimonies of those who had actual encounters, brave researchers, explorers, dreamers, you can say. So, if you like my research, I ask you that you please support me. You will find the links in the description to this video. I would really appreciate that, and that you would subscribe to my channel, tell others about my channel, and like my videos. Thank you. And Happy New Year 2023 to all my listeners. Again, thank you.